Don't giggle, all right? Don't you start me off. That's no good. I'm Terry Facey. At about 23, I gave up my day job and I started making furniture. It had always been something I'd wanted to do. I was found in my shed by an antique dealer who brought me 17th century furniture every week. I was given bureaus to make bookcases for, all kinds of tables to restore. I cobbled together so many pieces from that period that it just actually got inside me. And eventually, instead of just repairing things, I started making. As I got older and older, my furniture got smaller and smaller, which was very handy. The V&A asked me if I could come here and measure this 350-year-old table so that I could make a small replica of it. It's a piece that I've always loved. It's got the most wonderful barley twist legs. Lovely inlaid top with olive wood on six-sided pieces. It's quite unique. I don't usually see pieces with that configuration of veneer. And the challenge to make it at 8th scale was something which I had to take up. I'll need to collect the right twigs to cut. Olive wood wouldn't scale. You having the heart, the black centre, is very easy to do at a very small size. The Woodland Trust, who take care of all these woods, when they trim all the lower branches off, they're very happy with me taking pieces of yew wood that I find to work with on the furniture. So there's a piece here which looks very promising. It's obviously been cut a while ago, so it'll be nice and dry. And all I've got to do now is just to take off the outside branches and cut it into lengths. And that'll be a piece for me to work with. The wonderful thing about this is that the heart is so strong, so coloured throughout the wood. It gives me the option to use it for very small pieces. Once this is cut, of course, you'll be able to see that the grain follows right the way through, obviously, but that means that you can make beautiful little patterns using the continuity of each slice. So it's very nice to find straight pieces. Very often they're so twisted that it's a battle, but this will be quite nice. The countryside crafts, which probably in Victorian times or even in just the last century, included things like hedging and ditching. And there was also a hedge bodger, and they knew every hedge in the district. And they would be able to find pieces of wood that cabinet makers or pattern makers would want, and they would go to that particular place, take out that piece of wood, and without doing damage, just using the resources. So I feel like an 18th or 17th century hedge bodger whenever I come into the woods and take the wood that I need. There's no difference between what I'm doing now and what they were doing all that time ago. So once I've found those, I'll have to break a piece of early furniture because the oak from the early furniture is so good. It's so much harder and closer grain than modern oak that you can buy. So once I've collected all that, I'll have to work out how I can scale it and measure it and it's quite a challenge, and I'm really looking forward to it. Well, this drawer came out of a chest on chest from about mid-1700s. The chest on chest itself, the carcass was completely woodwormy and rotten, but the drawers, miraculously, were almost as good as new. And the oak in them is so fantastic. To be able to use this as opposed to modern oak is just chalk and cheese. These are the pieces that I marked up with the V&A, the actual table, and now I can measure them, and I'm measuring in inches, of course, and then I drew the table, and then I marked on it the inches, converted them to millimetres, and then I was able to divide them all by 8. So that established the size. Now I can use this wood that I've just taken from the drawer, and I can cut it into the carcass size. I've actually got the size of the table in front of me physically with the stick, which is what they would have had in 1600. I'm sure that's come down through the ages. This is the carcass, and it's ready to assemble. I'm simply going to glue it together and use the base to hold the structure in the right place. I've cut the small pieces for the drawer. Because they're so small, I'm doing it on a slightly larger scale so you can actually see how the joint works. It's a dovetail joint, which describes the shape of the tail of a dove. And it's that construction so that when you pull a drawer, the joint holds solid. I'm going to mark the drawer, the sides, and then mark the dovetail. Then I can cut it. I'll be marking these with the knife, so it's very precise, and I'll be using the little fine saw to cut the dovetail, and I'll be using the very fine chisel to take out the parts that need to be taken out. Joints like this probably come from architecture, where stone was cut so that one thing actually linked to another without anything but its shape holding it firm. By using that technique with the wood, drawers have been made 400 years ago, are still operating without any problem. Once the joint is tapped together, it'll grip itself with just a little bit of glue. And when the whole structure is put together with the base in, the bottom of the drawer in, it's incredibly robust and can last a dovetailed drawer will last a lifetime. So I've cut the 4 lengths, and now I have to mark the centres so I know where to drill so that I can put it in the lathe. So it's simple enough. I have to do it by eye because I could never measure it. These are now ready to be drilled, and then they'll be turned. Traditionally, they would have been turned on a treadle lathe. I have a miniature lathe. When I make these into barley twists, it's exactly the same as originally done. There's no other way of doing it. It has to be done by hand, by eye, because you're just simply taking a piece of wood and shaping it, and that's it. I think it comes from the the barley twist suites that were probably made in Victorian times. A lot of these terms like oyster veneering and barley twist evolved during Victorian times. The barley twist was probably the most difficult shape to produce for furniture, and there's some wonderful examples. I can see and I know how long it took somebody to get every turn of the barley twist exactly the same and to finish it and make it look almost like a snake wrapped around a pole. But I've loved perfecting it, and perfecting it in miniature has been absolutely crazy, but it's been good fun. This was a long chisel that I'd had for a short time, and now it's a short chisel that I've had for a long time. But the steel is just as good as it was, and so I still keep using it. Well, they're all looking the same. I've burnished them so that the wax will take pretty easily, and then all I need to do is to cut them to size, drill them, and put the dowels in. I'm always amazed when you cut through a piece that looks like this and you get this absolute beauty inside. It's so wonderful. You can create the most incredible patterns with it, and it's just a contrast between, again, the sap and the heart, and then you have the little distortions where the twigs have come out that we trimmed off earlier, and you can never know what you're going to get when you cut it open. It's just wonderful. I've spent my whole life gazing at these incredible things that emerge from something as ordinary looking as that, and inside there is the most wonderful patterns. Lovely, lovely pieces. Yew wood is, I feel, one of the hardest, most robust timbers. It will just take everything. You can't break it. It's impossible. Even the small twigs you can't break unless they're old and rotten. But so you've gone from that right the way to this in one slice. It's just wonderful. So I've cut through and exposed the heart, which is the strength of the wood. The sap is where the sap runs, and the heart broke into 3 pieces to supply the 3 twigs. Now, if I cut this through, I'll have a heart that runs from one end to the other, which means I can make the little 6-sided pieces that will form the inlay for the top. So because we've established that the twig has got a heart running through to the centre, I'm going to sand 2 flats on it at right angles to each other, which means I can then push it through the saw and slice the centre out square to itself. That's the next stage. this kind of what the Victorians called oyster veneer. I think it was probably based on olive wood, which when you cut it through it does look like an oyster shell. But they did use yew wood, king wood, walnut and other woods for this kind of inlay, this kind of oyster veneer. So that now that I've found the heart and I've got the right angle cut, I can now cut the heart out and then I can cut the six-sided piece from that. So I'll end up with a small square stick, which I'll then trim the edges off to create the six-sided veneer, which will then be laid down so that all the hearts will show on the tabletop. So when they come out from under the machine, I've got to make sure they're all the right thickness so that they're compatible with the veneer, so they glue evenly. Now the heart itself is never going to be perfectly in the centre of every one because the twig changes as it moves along its length. But providing the hearts are showing, then it becomes a very nice pattern, as on the original table. Each six-sided piece can be stuck to the gum paper to create the shape, which is the same shape as the veneer on the top. This is the pattern of the top of the table, and this void describes the shape where the six-sided pieces will go. So now I'm going to put them onto the tape here to assemble them, and I'll be doing 4 of them to do the 4 corners. Once those 4 are all taped together, I'll be able to assemble them along with the circles with the banding on them, and I'll be able to cut one into the other, and we'll have the tabletop pressed, all taped together to be able to assemble the top. So that's sufficient for one corner. From the veneer I cut, I've taken the slivers from the edge, which form the line, and by putting them on the dowel and then carefully twisting them round, they'll take on the shape of the dowel. You can see how easily they go round the different shapes that we're working with. Once they've gone round and they've found the shape, then they're glued on, and that will form the centres on the top to have the six-sided veneer put round them. So that's how we achieve that. And so we now have the start of the finished top. The olive wood table in the V&A, the fellow who made it, or the people who made it, because there's probably more than one, they used almost identical techniques of the techniques that I've used. Working with the wood is identical. Making all the parts to it will be just the same. I do use electric saws. I don't use an electric planer, but I use an electric sander. I do things that I feel I'm part of. So I don't want to fiddle about for a long, long time doing something perfect. I want to do it as they did it. They got on with it. That's why I like this period, because I like people being part of what they do. Veneer has always been used to make marquetry. Marquetry is by having several sheets of veneer of different colours and cutting through them, and then like a jigsaw puzzle, and then assembling them to create the patterns. And of course you couldn't scale that, so we've painted it with a brilliant artist who managed to make the whole thing look real. So you've got to try and polish out every blemish so that the light reflects immediately off of the surface. When that's done, then the tiniest of pores in the wood, or cells in the wood, can be filled with wax. You can stain, which I have to do in some places. The legs in particular were a lot of sap in them, so to be able to stain those down to match the other veneer is fine. When that's the first wax is on there, then coloured wax can be added and gradually built up, but it almost has to all be taken off in between coats. And I know, having read about polishing in the 1700s, they'd take months to polish a piece of furniture. They'd let the beeswax settle into the grain, they'd polish it, then they'd go on again and again and again every week, until they've got a very hard, perfect surface, which lasts for centuries. When that's done, well, all you can do is stand back and admire it. And really, I think I do admire what we've managed to do. And it does just look like the table in the V&A. It's obviously not a perfect replica, but it's got the feel of the original one. Some things are slightly out of balance, some cutting is slightly imperfect, but it's part of me, and I like that.